Good morning and welcome. It's my privilege to call this hearing to order. I would like to thank our witnesses for taking the time out of their busy schedules to share your expertise and perspectives on the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act, S222. This bill, which would permit schools to offer students whole, reduced, low-fat and fat-free flavored and unflavored milk, has enjoyed strong bipartisan support in both the House and the Senate, including from many members on this committee. Last Congress, the House passed this legislation by an impressive vote of 330 to 99. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee to make progress on this important bill in the Senate. We know that America is facing an obesity challenge and nutrition is under a microscope. When it comes to the diet of children, we know there are a number of health challenges facing young students, including childhood obesity, access, evolving nutrient science, and many others. The school meal programs are key in addressing children's health by providing nutritious, balanced meals to ensure students have the fuel they need to be successful in the classroom. School food services directors work tirelessly to meet nutrition standards, stay within tight budgets, and determine what students will actually consume. There's no point in commending ourselves for the nutritious value of school lunches if they wind up in the trash can. Over the years, we've seen many changes in the nutrition standards across many different venues. We've discussed and debated requirements for whole grains, sodium, fruits, vegetables, and dairy within and outside Congress. Equally important is the engagement from everyone working on these programs, state and local officials, parents, teachers, and all who are involved in supplying school meals. Today's hearing is an excellent opportunity for us to hear from a wide variety of experts to examine the important role of milk in school nutrition programs. We are fortunate to have a representative from the Department of Ag, along with the nutrition science experts and leaders from both state level and school districts with on-the-ground experience in implementing school meal programs. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses and putting their advice into action as we continue this work this Congress. I now turn to Ranking Member Klobuchar for opening statement.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thanks to our witnesses who have traveled to share their perspectives on child nutrition programs, what's working and what we can do to improve them. I have long supported the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act. Thank you, Senator Marshall. And this hearing is an important opportunity to underscore the importance of school nutrition and threats to their success. Ensuring kids have access to nutrition foods at school is a win-win. A win for kids, a win for schools, and a win for our farmers who provide healthy and nutritious foods. I will note there's kind of a perfect storm going on right now with the tariffs, which I oppose, these proposed tariffs, with input costs, with weather, which is not in our control, whether it's floods, whether it's tornadoes, and then, of course, with the chaos right now with cuts and with people being terminated and then rehired with avian flu. When I'm out there, I just did a 14-county rural tour, including several small town halls with the Farmers Union, and I really got a sense of where people are coming from. And they aren't activists, they're regular farmers, ranchers, mostly small farmers, and it's a lot going on. And so I would just point out that as one of our witnesses today, Mr. Gorman, has said, the funding that we put into school meals is some of the best money that we spend. Not only do school meal programs reduce hunger and promote learning, they also support our local farmers and ranchers at a time when it's probably the very worst time I've seen in decades to step away from that, because the economy is getting to be much more volatile than it was a few months ago. That means people are going to need these programs like the SNAP program, and then you also have the farmers and ranchers that are getting headwinds at them on many different fronts. Over the last decade, we've made significant improvements to child nutrition. The nutrition quality of school lunch and school breakfast has improved, and at the same time, we have worked to streamline school meal programs. Community eligibility has been a tremendous success, eliminating burdensome red tape while increasing the number of schools offering meals. In the 2023-24 school year, nearly 48,000 schools with 23.6 million students participated. Community eligibility has played a key role in allowing Minnesota to offer meals for children. To provide meals to all kids in our state, Minnesota chips in state funds on top of the federal reimbursements to allow every school to offer meals. As this committee looks at federal child nutrition programs, we should ensure changes to the programs improve them rather than take away nutritious foods from kids across the country. Unfortunately, schools, charities, and food banks across the country are facing a loss of these fresh, nutritious foods because of USDA's recent cancellation of local food purchase agreement and local food for school funds. In Minnesota, for example, schools will lose significant funding for local commodities and farmers. Like one livestock operator I heard from, are losing critical domestic markets at the same time when retaliatory tariffs, as I just noted, are costing farmers and ranchers greatly across global markets. And the cancellation of additional anti-hunger funding will only exacerbate food insecurity. Our federal nutrition programs are intended to work together, addressing hunger both in school and at home. I led my colleagues in demanding answers about the recent cut to local emergency food providers. If local charities and food pantries cannot meet the needs of the growing number of food insecure kids, school food programs will be asked to do more to ensure our kids aren't going hungry, not less. In the House, cuts to school meal programs through reconciliation are on the table. As the House Ag Committee's $230 billion cut, likely to nutrition programs like SNAP, would be devastating to child nutrition. SNAP is also our largest child nutrition program, serving 15.5 million children in 2022. Cuts to SNAP will also have a direct impact on school meals. Many kids participating in school meals actually do so through SNAP. So cuts to SNAP are also cuts to school meals. And recent proposals to cut SNAP would have kicked nearly 1 million kids off of child nutrition. Well, we can continue to make improvements to our school nutrition programs, and I hope we will have those discussions in the context of a farm bill, which we so sorely need. We shouldn't ignore the progress that we have made, and we can't pretend that the cuts that are currently on the table won't stop that progress dead in the tracks. I hope that we can all agree that we should first do no harm and then build upon what's working. With that, I look very forward to hearing from the witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar. We will now introduce our first witness. Dr. Eve Stute serves as Director of the Nutrition Guidance and Analysis Division at the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion within the Food Nutrition Service at USDA. Dr. Stute has played a key part in the development of dietary guidelines for Americans dating back to 2010, serving roles at both the USDA and the Department of Health and Human Services. She holds a doctorate in nutrition from Texas Women's University. Again, thank you for being here this morning. Dr. Stute, you're now recognized for your statement.
Thank you, Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee for the opportunity to appear before you today. It's truly an honor. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Eve Stute, the Director of the Nutrition Guidance and Analysis Division at the Center for Nutrition Policy and Promotion within the Food Nutrition Service at USDA. I've served at USDA for over 15 years and have supported the development of the dietary guidelines since the 2010 edition. In my current role, I serve as a career subject matter expert on the dietary guidelines process and lead USDA staff in the development of the dietary guidelines with our partners at HHS. Evidence continues to support dairy as an important part of a healthy dietary pattern, and yet for about 90% of the U.S. population, dairy intakes fall below recommendations. Dietary intake data has shown reductions in intake over time, which sets the stage for nutrient shortfalls, particularly for calcium and vitamin D. The latest edition of the dietary guidelines states that healthy dietary patterns feature dairy, including milk, yogurt, and cheese. The dietary guidelines also recommend that most dairy choices should be fat-free or low-fat and with no to little added sugars. Dairy recommendations have been relatively consistent in the dietary guidelines since the first edition in 1980, and more recent editions have evolved to include low lactose, lactose-free, and soy options. Regarding current intakes, as I mentioned, 90% of the U.S. population does not meet dairy recommendations, and intakes have been declining over time. For example, in adolescents, dairy intake is about a half a cup lower per day now than it was about 20 years ago. We also have national data that describes how many Americans report drinking milk on any given day. In adolescents, the percent reporting drinking milk was about 75% in the 1970s, just under 50% in the early 2000s, and the most recent data suggests that about 35% of adolescents report drinking milk on any given day. USDA's school meal programs support the consumption of milk among children. Under current school meal nutrition standards, schools must offer a variety, at least 2, options of milk with breakfast and lunch. Schools may currently offer flavored and unflavored, low-fat, fat-free, and lactose-free milk. The Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act of 2025 would change the permissible milk types that may be offered in school meals to include those recommended by the current dietary guidelines, fat-free and low-fat milk, to also include reduced fat and whole milk. The bill would also exempt milk fat from the saturated fat limits in school meals. Currently, more than 80% of children and adolescents exceed the recommendation to limit saturated fat intake to less than 10% of calories per day. Across the lifespan, efforts to increase dairy intakes would improve nutrient intakes and support overall health. Offering dairy during school meals supports consumption directly and can also set the stage for consuming a healthy dietary pattern outside of school meals. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you for your testimony. We'll now begin with questions. Each member will have 5 minutes. Dr. Studi, USDA research shows that while milk consumption has been falling across all ages for several decades, it fell almost twice the rate as the previous 2 decades, from 2010 to 2019. This coincides with research finding that 90% of Americans do not meet the dietary guidelines recommended dairy consumption per day. Your testimony also notes that for all children, more dairy is consumed as higher fat versus fat-free or low-fat versions. Given the disconnections between the recommendations and consumption, what was the science used to justify removing whole and reduced fat milk from schools?
If it's possible, sir, I'd like to spend just a minute talking about what the dietary guidelines recommend overall. The dietary guidelines, and I'm referencing the 2020 edition of the dietary guidelines that was released in December of 2020, and it recommends an overall healthy diet. And that diet is intended to have some flexibility so that it can be adapted to reflect personal preferences and individual needs. So this healthy dietary pattern includes dairy, but also includes vegetables, fruits, a variety of protein foods, and grains, particularly whole grains. It's also a reality that we kind of have a number of calories that individuals should consume their diet within. So as a general statement, across the dietary guidelines, we recommend consuming foods from all of those different food groups, and that most of the foods consumed should have little to no added sugars or saturated fat. So that's not specific to the dairy group, but more broadly, to help us to stay within those calorie limits, just consuming less added sugars and saturated fat. Now, for the typical American diet, as has been noted, we are in a situation where most Americans do not meet the dietary guidelines. We have a lot of children and adolescents. You referenced the obesity, the prevalence of overweight and obesity. So what we see is that in the typical American diet, we don't have a lot of room. We're consuming too many calories, too much saturated fat, too much added sugars. We don't have a lot of room in the diet to consume the calories and saturated fat that are found in higher fat dairy products. So at a population level, the recommendation is to choose most dairy should be fat-free or low-fat. Now, that doesn't mean within the context of a healthy diet, dairy products with higher fat content, whether that be reduced fat or whole milk, can be a part of a healthy dietary pattern. But it's really important to think about that overall context, the overall diet that is consumed. And the dietary guidelines are intended to provide that flexibility so that different options can be chosen based on needs and preferences.
Very good. Senator Klobuchar.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Stute, there's, of course, a lot of discussion about SNAP right now in general. And could you talk about how participating in programs like SNAP or Medicaid, this is going to be right in front of us in the next few weeks, is linked to school meals?
I totally understand and appreciate the question. I'm really here in my capacity to speak to subject matter expertise in the dietary guidelines. I don't have information related to that specific question, but we're happy to bring that back to FNS to provide a response.
Okay, very good. You've been a nutrition scientist for a long time. Can you please explain how school meals have improved in recent years, as well as in areas where there's need for growth?
Yes, this National School Lunch Act requires USDA to develop school meal nutrition standards that are consistent with the goals of the dietary guidelines. And over the years, USDA has worked to further align school meals with the dietary guidelines. And we've seen a great progress and improvement in nutritional quality. Research does show that for most children, school meals are the healthiest meals that they consume in a day. And we have this tool called the Healthy Eating Index that assesses how well a package of food aligns with the dietary guidelines, and it has a score from 0 to 100. When we look at general consumption in the U.S., the HEI score in the U.S. is about a 56 out of 100, indicating we have a lot of room for improvement. But within school meals, the HEI score is between 79 and 81, which means school meals are more consistent with the dietary guidelines, and we've seen great improvements in various aspects of the school meals.
And you went over dairy and how important it is and how kids aren't getting enough of it. Could you talk about the fact that dairy does provide a really important part in school meals, and is there evidence that school meals do help promote dairy because people get exposed to drinking milk, kids get exposed?
Of course, yes. Providing dairy in the school setting impacts intakes directly right there, and we do have evidence that school meals, as I mentioned, are the healthiest meals that kids are consuming in a day. I think I can take that back to give more specific statistics, but we certainly do have evidence that offering it, providing it, does promote consumption.
Okay, thank you. Is USDA's position that fruits and vegetables are a critical part of a healthy diet?
Yes.
Okay, good. I agree. And for the record, I want to point out that USDA's canceling the local foods purchase assistance are contrary to that advice. USDA's own data shows that 56% of the funds from that program went to buying produce, by far the largest purchase category. So that is, I'm really concerned about that, because if we want to promote fruits and vegetables, we actually are, that cancellation to me just shows the opposite. Do you want to comment at all on that?
I can't comment on that directly, but we're happy to bring that back to the department.
Okay, I appreciate that. Last, how can we encourage more consumption of nutritious dairy foods like milk, yogurt, and cheese?
I think offering it in school meals, incorporating it into programs, I think across settings and sectors and all that we do, all of us have a role to play in promoting healthy choices, healthy outcomes, and healthy children. So I think it's it's not just a one place, it's across settings and sectors where we need to make that a priority.
Thank you.
Senator Tuberville.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor, for being here today. My former profession was working with students and kids. Traveled to hundreds and hundreds of high schools across the country in all 50 states, ate at lunchrooms, and the food in most of them were atrocious. 2010, we basically did away with milk for some reason. I can't imagine. I've got a new granddaughter. My daughter-in-law is breastfeeding. We looked at the formula that we could have been feeding my new granddaughter. We want to do away with something, we do away with that because it's nothing but sugar. And we're going to look at something that's so important to our kids growing up and their physical attributes of growing up to an adult. We're looking at possibility of milk being detrimental. It's mind-boggling to me, but I guess there's a lot more smarter people than me. I used to have a training table for players. All of our athletes, and you could put milk and you could put tea, you could put water out there, they'd drink the milk. Athletes. And there's a reason that they look a lot better than a lot of our kids nowadays. But at the end of the day, we have to make a decision, what's better? I can't believe we're even getting involved in this, but science improves and changes over time. We know that. Our nutrition standards should not be what they were in 2010. They have to change. As nutrition science data has changed, can you discuss the 2005 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee's conclusions on dairy consumption's effect on children?
And just to clarify, just to make sure I heard you correctly, you were referencing the 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The 2025 Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee did an extensive review. They are convened as an external advisory committee, and the 2025 committee had 20 members. They did an extensive review on all aspects of the diet, including dairy, data analysis, a number of systematic reviews, and food pattern modeling. At the end of the day, they looked at a lot of new evidence. There is evidence that's looking at food sources of saturated fat, so dairy that has different amounts of saturated fat, these different types that are exactly the conversation today. They also did a number of food pattern modeling analyses to look, and what that does is looks to what happens if you change the amount of dairy in a pattern. At the end of the day, they found that you can't reduce the amount of dairy in a dietary pattern, that the amount that's recommended still holds, and that's in large part because of all the nutrients that dairy provides. It's a good source and the major source of calcium, vitamin D, and about a dozen other nutrients in the diet. At the end of the day, there are recommendations to the departments, and I'll note that that's advice to the departments for informing the next edition of the dietary guidelines, but their advice was to maintain the current guidance. Now, we are at a point, and Secretaries Rollins and Kennedy have acknowledged their commitment to supporting the development of the dietary guidelines to be released later this year, and they have also discussed doing a line-by-line review of the committee's report and basing the next edition of the dietary guidelines on science. So there will, I expect, be a lot more discussion related to the topic of dairy as well as other aspects of the diet. But at the end of the day, I think the 2025 committee continued to emphasize the importance of dairy in a healthy dietary pattern.
So at the end of the day, don't you agree that any milk, 2%, whole milk, is much better for our kids growing up than soda?
Yes. I think the point of the dietary guidelines is that there is flexibility. There's a number of different options within the dairy food group, and whether that be fat-free, low-fat, reduced-fat whole milk, it's important to make selections that are right, that support individual needs and preferences, and in that context of the larger dietary pattern.
Thank you.
Senator Bennett.
Thank you very much, Senator Klobuchar, our ranking member, and thank you to all of you for having this hearing. Thank you for your testimony today. before I came to the Senate, I was the superintendent of schools in Denver, as you may know, and in that job learned firsthand how important access to nutrition is through school meals and other USDA programs, how they directly affect our kids' ability to learn for all the reasons that the senator from Alabama was talking about. And expanding access to nutrition programs and improving those programs is critical, not just for our kids, but for people of all ages. It's why yesterday I filed the Hot Foods Act again to cut red tape and SNAP and to help working families, single parents, people with disabilities, and seniors put nutritious meals on the table. I look forward to hearing your thoughts about that as the legislation develops, to see how we can improve our program access, strengthen child nutrition, make sure that we're knocking down barriers to accessing food. The chairman isn't here, but he and I have worked for a long time together to make sure that that the school calendar doesn't affect that, and that there's the opportunity for kids to be able to get to food no matter where they are, and do it during the summer as well as when school is in session, which is so important. I want to thank you, Dr. Studi, for your testimony and for your work at USDA. During the 2023-24 school year, schools across Colorado served approximately 184,000 breakfasts and over 435,000 lunches daily, underscoring the significant role these programs play. Programs like SNAP and meal service options like the community eligibility provision work in tandem to help ensure students can have access to these meals. As I was saying, SNAP supports families to help meet their nutritional needs and helps ensure that more children have consistent access to healthy food options, including at school. CEP leverages SNAP, as you know, and other to allow eligible schools to offer free breakfast and lunch to all students. So I come to my question. Providing free breakfast and lunch to all students has been proven to increase access to nutritional meals, make sure that kids eat those nutritious meals. It cuts red tape for families. What implications would losing access to meals due to changes in SNAP or the community eligibility provision have on our ability to meet these nutritional goals, would you say?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and appreciate your discussion around the broad range of programs. Again, I'm here in my capacity related to the dietary guidelines. FNS does offer a number, the programs that you referenced, and we're happy to take that back and provide a response related to the broader program implementation.
But could you talk a little bit more about, I mean, what is the importance to our national commitment to kids being able to get the nutrition that they need?
Yes, I think we all agree that it's important for children, adolescents, adults to eat healthy foods and to improve health. So I think there's definitely a commitment and an important aspect to promoting healthy consumption in kids.
Okay. All right, I've got one other question, but I'll submit it for the record. Thank you very much for being here.
Senator Grassley.
Yeah, thank you, Senator George. Dr. Studi, thank you for your testimony. And you spoke recently in your testimony about the decline of dairy consumption. The Dietary Guidelines for Americans has limited the option of milk offered in schools now for years. In the most recent guidelines, higher fat milk was cited to have favorable growth in body consumption composition while reducing childhood obesity. The more restrictive school lunches are, the higher childhood obesity rates have become. So my first question to you, during your years at USDA, there has been a decrease in milk consumption. Do you think that that decline has had a positive effect on children's health?
No. Obviously, we want to promote the consumption of a diet that aligns with the dietary guidelines, and that's across the board, all the different food groups, including dairy. So it is of great concern, I think, that consumption has been declining. I think these conversations are very important on how to promote healthier consumption. So no, it's obviously a great concern that dietary consumption has worsened over time, and we're seeing that in increased prevalence of overweight and obesity, increased prevalence of prediabetes in children and adolescents.
And then lastly, do you think that the continuing to restrict full-fat milk options will change the decline in milk consumption?
I don't have data to speak to. As has been mentioned in the written testimony, we do acknowledge there is data from our colleagues at USDA's Agricultural Research Service that speaks to the most commonly consumed forms of dairy. We do see that reduced fat milk is the most commonly consumed, followed by whole milk, then low fat, and then skim milk. But across all types of milk, consumption is too low. And so, there is a good thing about dairy, I think, is that there are a variety of options to fit different needs and preferences. And whatever that option is, that is right for the individual child, whatever that option is, we need to work to improve current consumptions.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I'll yield back my time.
Very good. Senator Durbin is up next.
Thanks, Senator Klobuchar. I took an interest in school lunches and started looking in my state at what the kids are eating. I went to Roberto Clemente High School in Chicago, an inner city school, largely African American and Hispanic. And I asked them, what do the kids eat for breakfast? And they said, oh, the most popular breakfast here are a bag of Flaming Hots and an orange pop. That would be what they pick up at the store on the way to school. I also went to Westinghouse High School, which is on the west side, and a beautiful school, and asked to sit down at the with school lunch. They didn't particularly want me to do that, but I did anyway. The menu that day featured corn dogs, which is, we believe, the source of all life in the Midwest, pizza, and for vegetables, French fries. That was the lunch. I also have paid close attention, as I hope my colleagues have, of the trash cans in the lunchroom and what's being thrown away by the students. It's entirely too damn much food being thrown away to start with. And I often wondered, we can give speeches and do our analysis in Washington, but the bottom line is, what will those kids eat during the course of a school lunch? Bottom line. So I look at this controversy, and I suppose it's a controversy as to whether whole milk should be allowed, required in school lunches. Your background, I take it, is in nutrition. You're referred to as doctor, so is that correct? PhD?
Yes, sir.
Good. I'm sure you're qualified. And I am also sure that we are always asking the question when it comes to nutrition, too much fat, too much sugar, too much sodium. Aren't those the three things we kind of boil the conversation down to?
Yes, those are key components that we look at.
So let me ask you a question. I know where Senator Marshall's coming from. He is the original milkman in the Senate Ag Committee, and proud of it. And I just have to ask this. I look at the groups that oppose this bill, and they include the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, American Academy of Pediatrics, the American Heart Association, the American Public Health Association, the Center for Science and the Public Interest, the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners, National WIC Association. Do you know any major health groups that support this bill?
I can't. I don't have information to that regard.
Okay, I'd be interested in that. Has any survey been done about kids, whether they will accept 2% milk, the same as whole milk, or have a preference for skim milk or whole milk or 2%?
We don't have data on preference directly, just on data on what is currently consumed. And the most commonly consumed is 2%, followed by whole, then low fat and fat free. So we do have data, but across the board, current consumptions need to increase. So whatever the form is, we need to have greater consumption of dairy.
Did you use a figure 35% consumption for a certain group of teenagers, I guess it is?
Using the most recent data, about 35% of adolescents consume fluid milk on any given day.
I'll tell you, I'm just amazed it's that high. I really am. When you consider all the advertising for all the pop and soda and sweetened drinks that these kids are exposed to during the course of their lives, and the advertising for milk is virtually zero, as I see it. I think we need much more milk consumption. But moving in the direction toward those soda and pop drinks, it certainly can't be good for kids, for their teeth or their health. Thank you. I yield.
Thank you very much, Senator Durbin. Senator Marshall.
Well, thank you, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and thank you, Senator Boozman, for allowing us to have this. But if you could just spare me a moment here, I got to clear my throat a little bit. There, I can speak better now. You know, we all came to Congress with a reason, and I've sat down on my first day and had a list of 10 things I wanted to do when I got here. So, you know, save the world, save Medicare, save Medicaid, balance the budget, and get whole milk back in school. So this is a great day for us to have a hearing on this, and I do appreciate the members of the Ag Committee coming here and having this discussion as well. I think about whole milk growing up, where my grandparents delivered milk to us 2 or 3 times a week, and it was just part of our diet, part of a healthy diet, and how important whole milk is. You know, you think about the MAHA movement, the Make America Healthy Again movement, it's about whole foods, and I think we could characterize whole milk as part of that MAHA movement as well. You know, I think about the fat-soluble vitamins, which are so important, that we have to have some fat in our body to absorb vitamins A, D, E, and K. So maybe we'll just talk about, you know, there's bad fats, there's good fats, and ask Dr. Studi a little bit about what are the good fats, what are the good things in whole milk that separate it from the 1% and the lesser fat parts of milk.
So first, I do want to note the dietary guidelines don't say that whole milk is a bad food to consume. There's nothing about the dietary guidelines. It does say that in general, considering what current consumptions are in the U.S., considering current health status of children and adolescents, generally, most children should increase consumption, and probably the best way to do that is through lower fat options. But for those who eat a healthy diet, for those who are active, as you mentioned, athletes, you know, whole milk can be a great option. And so it really is thinking about the overall context of the diet, rather than kind of saying one food is good or bad. Dairy is a healthy choice, but it really matters what you're eating with that dairy.
Well, I'm going to just talk a little bit more about healthy fats. And some of the good things about these healthy fats is it helps with hormone production. So think about adolescents going through puberty, those types of things. So there's good fats that help with that hormone production. And also I think there's good studies to show that healthy fats also decrease your appetite for later, that it has some satiety impact. Would you agree or expand on those thoughts?
I am aware of that research. We haven't addressed it directly in the dietary guidelines, but it definitely, I'm aware of the research that you're referencing. So, yes. And
then you also would agree with me that whole milk has small amounts of omega-3 fatty acids, which support brain health and inflammation control as well.
Yes, the dietary guidelines actually recommend for those 1 to 2 years of age that plain whole milk be the type of dairy that is consumed because of the importance of whole milk to supporting brain development. And then after that point, the recommendation is to move towards lower fat. There's a bit of a evidence gap as to exactly when that transition to lower fat options might be most beneficial, but there's definitely benefits of plain whole milk, particularly in young children, to supporting brain development.
Well, association doesn't necessarily determine cause, but I think as we saw whole milk come off of the school lunch menus, we also saw consumption of milk come down consistently. So Senator Durbin makes a good point about, if it doesn't, it has to taste good. And then I don't know that I'm aware of any good studies either proving my point, but certainly it seems to me that whole milk tastes a whole lot better, and that we've seen milk consumption go down when whole milk was taken out of the school lunches. Would that be accurate?
I don't have data for specifically school meals and what has happened since, for example, the 2010, 2012, when it moved towards just low-fat and fat-free. But we do see that, as you mentioned, at the national level. We see that milk consumption really, drinking fluid milk started to decline in the early 2000s, and it has continued to decline. And I think it is, very concerning that current consumption in adolescents is about half a cup lower per day than it was 2 decades ago.
Great. I want to make one more point. I was going to save this question for one of the other witnesses, but I still want to make the point about my concern about osteoporosis and osteopenia. That bone mass density peaks around age 28. And what we're seeing now is a generation of people reaching that age that didn't drink milk, and their bone density is down a standard deviation. Maybe it's more than that. So while today most women start developing osteopenia, and when you reach that peak bone mass at age 28, the rest of our life, that aging process starts. It's really hard to build bone mass beyond then. So we're going to have women develop osteopenia, osteoporosis a decade sooner, and we're going to see men suddenly also have osteopenia as well. And one thing I can't believe I forgot to do was to thank Senator Welch for his leadership on this bill, Senator Fetterman, Gillibrand, Slotkin, King, McCormick, Grassley, Hyde-Smith, Risch, Crapo, Ernst, and Collins for help supporting this as well. So Senator Welch, especially thank you for your leadership. Vermont, known as a great milk state. So we'll have to come back later to catch the thoughts on osteopenia and porosis. I'm way past my time. So thank you, Ranking Member.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And then next up, well, we have two senators who have a lot of cows in their state. But even though Vermont may be most identified with it, I think Senator Schiff was here first. Senator Schiff.
Thank you, Chairman and Ranking Member. Thanks for holding this hearing today. And Dr. Studi, thank you for being here. It's nice as an Adam to be in the presence of another Eve. My wife is Eve also, by the way. Before we get to the questions about the bill, as we speak, my colleagues on the other side of the aisle are drafting a bill that would eliminate school meal programs for millions of kids. That bill may come to the Senate as soon as this week. That bill is the bill that is the prime focus of this hearing deserves attention, but I don't see how we can discuss children's health and nutrition without acknowledging the important role of federally funded school meal programs that are literally a lifeline for so many kids. And I asked some of the school districts in California to send me their experiences, and let me just read one that highlights the importance of our support for school meal programs. I was in the cafeteria, and a second grade class was boarding the bus for a field trip. The teacher had told all the students to bring your lunch because we won't be able to go to the cafeteria today, figuring everyone had food at home at this school on the right side of town. Lucy came to the cafeteria at 9:30 as they were boarding the bus to ask for something to drink because Daddy didn't have anything to drink at home. When we checked what Lucy did have, she had a small bag of Fritos and 2 pieces of leftover Halloween candy. I asked Lucy where her lunch was, and she looked at the ground and said, "The teacher said we won't be back in time for lunch, and this is all we have at home." Lucy relies on school lunch even on the good side of town, even when no one realizes she does. Children suffer in silence, even on the good side of town, in the middle of affluence. I seriously cry every time I tell this story and think of her face. That's a good illustration of what will be at stake on the floor this week with proposals to make massive cuts to the school meal programs. Let me turn to the question I have about this bill. And my question revolves the absence of any alternative that involves non-dairy alternatives in the bill. In California and many states represented by members of the committee, there are millions of students who are lactose intolerant or have adverse reactions to dairy. Lactose-free milk is not always a good option because of their cost to schools and because some kids can't drink milk due to sensitivity to milk proteins. And some kids simply want a non-dairy option. At the same time, requiring a formal written note for an alternative due to inability to drink milk is an unnecessary bit of red tape for students and parents. If this bill is about giving children access to nutritious options, would it improve health outcomes as well as a parent and student sense of choice to have easy access to non-dairy alternatives for kids?
Thank you for that question. I can speak first to the dietary guidelines and what it recommends related to what's included within the dairy food group. So the dairy food group within the dietary guidelines does include a variety of different cow milk options. And it also includes soy milk and soy yogurt as alternatives. And I say alternatives, but they are literally within the food group. So I think that your question about their uses within school meals might be a great question for the next panel. I know we also have data on that within FNS, but I can say within the dietary guidelines themselves, soy milk is provided as within the dairy group, and it can certainly be a healthy way to meet dairy recommendations.
Well, along those lines, do you see any reason for authorizing schools to offer whole milk on the lunch line, but not fortified soy milk from a nutritional point of view?
From a nutritional point of view, cow's milk and soy milk are included in the same group and provide very similar nutrient compositions.
Okay. I thank you, and this is not a denigration of the bill, which I supported in the House, but it is a call to include non-dairy alternatives as well. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you very much, Senator Schiff. Senator Justice.
Let me just say just things about the state of West Virginia. Just think about this just for a second. I'm a coach. I'm with the kids all the time, and I've been that way forevermore. Probably that's why I've got all this white hair. I'm really only 46 years old. No. But when you've coached as many games as I've coached, and I've coached 1,300 and some games, and with all that being said, you get white hair pretty easily. But you get white hair a lot easier if you just absolutely are there with the kids and you see what they're going through. You know, if you think in West Virginia, 1 out of every 5 kids faces food insecurity every single day. It's sad beyond belief. You know, when I was the governor in West Virginia, we made a real priority to try to some way, somehow, do something about hunger, do something about our food banks. We have an opportunity here to do something that is so precious it's off the chart. Now, it's unusual that the First Lady of West Virginia, when I was the governor, and my wife, Kathy, is with me today. She did something that is off the chart. She did something with communities and schools that was absolutely directed right at helping kids that were in real need. Now, just think about it. We're absolutely looking at the possibility of whole milk and how much meaningfulness that whole milk could bring to our children. Absolutely, many of our kids in our schools in West Virginia, these are the primary meals of their whole day. That's all there is to it. And absolutely, if we can't step up and do the right thing for nutrition for our children, and God knows there's many, many, many things that our kids are putting in their bodies that they shouldn't be putting in. That's all there is to it. But one of those things is not whole milk, in my opinion. With all that being said, also, being a coach, and not just athletes, I want you to pay really close attention to just this. Kids want good stuff to eat today. You may think that kids just want junk to eat today. You know, in all honesty, imagine this. Imagine having a kid that's a high school kid that's playing on your basketball team that has never eaten a candy bar in his life. You know, it's really true. Now, with all that being said, I am telling you, you have the attention of our children today. Our kids want to do better. They really do. And we have an opportunity to step up. And that's exactly what we should be doing. We should be trying in every possible way we possibly can to make our kids healthier, to absolutely give them the nutrition that they need. And I am absolutely, wholeheartedly, and not as a pun, but I am wholeheartedly in favor of moving forward with whole milk. So with all that being said, I defer my remaining time to our Madam Chairman.
Very good, thank you. And I know you've also been joined by your wife, Kathy, so we welcome her as well. Next up is Senator Welch.
Senator Justice.
What?
Is it
Senator Lujan's next. I'm sorry, he was here earlier. Are you sure? Okay, thanks.
Well, I was just going to say, you spoke for me. I really appreciated that. And also, I noticed my colleague from Kansas is usually low-key and rarely shows off except in service of milk. I appreciate I appreciate you doing that. You know, what you said, Senator Justice, is so absolutely true. And 1 in 5, you know, you use the word food insecure, that's what we're talking about. It's downright hungry. Kids are hungry. They show up and they're hungry, and it's through no fault of their own. And I don't know where things got off the rails, because I remember, have such a vivid memory as a boy, looking forward to Roger's box of milk when I got to school, and we all did, and it got us through the morning. And sometimes it was chocolate, which I guess we're not advocating for here, but I sneak a little of that every once in a while. Whole milk chocolate. But it's really reassuring to me that we're taking up this bill about whole milk, because it's about whole milk, it's about our farmers, it's about an acknowledgement that school is a place where kids are going to get the opportunity to get some decent nutrition. And it doesn't matter what our politics are. We all care about our kids, right? And it's tough. It's tough for a lot of families to get healthy food because so much has happened in the food industry where in order to make a lot of profit, the enterprises that sell food are oftentimes very consolidated, and the goal that they have is maximization of profit. And you look at what a lot of the ingredients are on some of the things that are in the store, and you've never heard of any of them. And whole food also, by the way, tends to be more locally produced. And the virtuous cycle that happens when you're getting local products, milk from Vermont dairy or Kansas dairy or West Virginia, or vegetables grown locally, that is healthy food, but it's also locally produced, and it strengthens the rural economy. And all of us in every one of our states is really suffering from incredible pressures on our rural economy that is making life very, very difficult there. So, Senator Marshall, I just want to thank you for your leadership on this very practical and I think long overdue legislation about whole milk. The other thing that is that I've been impressed at, Vermont is a big dairy state, as you mentioned, Senator Klobuchar. But, you know, there's an immense amount of pride among our dairy farmers. Who works harder? Maybe the coal miners, okay? But, well, I was in one of your coal mines, and they'll give them a run for their money. But that's the point, is that we can have a food system where we get nutritious food by people who are willing to work really, really hard. They're not in the goal of becoming millionaires. They're in the goal of a committed life to helping the kids and all of us have nutritious food. So we went off the rails when we made it tough for whole milk to be in the schools. And I also want to acknowledge your point about nutrition as a whole. You know, the USDA had some grants that resulted in Vermont getting a dairy innovation center, and that resulted in some facilities, milk tanks in the schools where the kids would be able to get milk when they wanted it, and they would take some milk home. And, you know, do you check everybody's wallet to see whether they've got money in it and can afford it or not? No, you took advantage of the fact that these kids are at school and they can just go over there and choose to drink some milk. And I mean, so I hope that as we pursue this whole milk opportunity for our kids and for our farmers, that it's the beginning of a real commitment to nutritious, locally produced, natural foods as being a much bigger part of what our diet is. Is this going to help us on the obesity issue that I think is a real problem for America, if we can get back to some whole milk products and other natural products?
I think we need to see how time goes. I think we are in a situation where diets are so far from recommendations across the board. We have the recommendations for a healthy diet include vegetables, fruits, grains, a variety of protein foods, and dairy. And in general, 80 to 90% of people in the U.S. do not meet the recommendations for vegetables, fruits, dairy, and we consume too many refined grains on average. We consume too much added sugars. We consume too much saturated fat. So I think this is it's one piece of the puzzle to incorporate more dairy, but we have a large nutrition problem, and I think it needs action across multiple fronts and not just dairy alone.
Thank you. My time is up, but I would say if we can do something that's good, let's do it, and then we'll do another thing that's good. Thank you.
Senator Lujan, at least you didn't have to wait long. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank everyone for this important hearing today. Now, it's my understanding that we're gathered here for a hearing that's titled the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act and Improving Children's Health. I just want that to sit in a little bit. Improving children's health. I appreciate that we're having this conversation today, but I think we're missing the big picture. There's a whole conversation going on right now about devastating the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. My colleagues from the other side of the aisle want to cut between $1 billion and $230 billion from SNAP. Improving children's health. This comes while President Trump pushes for the largest peacetime tax increase in modern U.S. history through sweeping tariffs. As the tariffs take effect and the cost of groceries rise, my Republican colleagues are planning to slash a few programs that exist to help families keep food on the table. I think it'd be important to have a hearing about that as well. For kids across the country, the funding levels we debate here in this room aren't an abstract number in the budget resolution. These are real kids, real people, people that we all represent. It's the difference between having a hot lunch at school and food in the cupboards when they come home and going hungry. Nearly 1 in 4 kids in the United States relies on SNAP benefits. These kids don't get to choose how much money their parents have in their bank accounts each week to buy food. Sometimes they don't even get to choose what they get to eat. So, Dr. Studi, I want to thank you for being here. I appreciated the information you provided in your testimony about the impacts of dairy consumption on the health of children. Currently, 1 in 4 children in the United States rely on SNAP to access food. In 2023, the dairy industry conservatively estimated that SNAP dollars purchased $9.5 billion of dairy products. $9.5 billion of dairy products purchased by SNAP A bunch of us represent states that have strong dairies. I do as well. I wonder what the conversations are like when we're talking to those dairy families and saying, don't worry, these snap cuts aren't going to devastate your practice. Don't worry, you don't have to get rid of herds. We need to face this for what it is, and like Senator Welch said, do what's right. I think, you know, some wise person once said that it's never a bad time to do what's right. So I have a few questions here. Dr. Studi, yes or no, did President Trump and the USDA cut $1 billion in funding for schools and food banks to buy fresh, locally grown food from nearby farmers by eliminating the Local Food and Schools Program and the Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement Program?
Sir, I'm here as a subject matter expert related to the dietary guidelines. I can't speak to that, but we're happy to bring that back to the department.
I can answer that question. The answer to that question is yes. On March 7, 2025, the USDA terminated the Local Food and Schools Program and the Local Food Purchase Assistance Cooperative Agreement Program. Dr. Studi, yes or no, did President Trump and the USDA cancel the Patrick Leahy Farm to School Grant Program, which provided schools with support for sourcing local foods for school lunches and breakfasts?
Thank you, sir. I'm not able to answer that question.
I have an answer to that one. It might surprise everyone. The answer to that question is also yes. USDA notified grant applicants on March 24th that the fiscal year 2025 competition for the Patrick Leahy Farm to Schools Grant Program was, quote, canceled. Dr. Studi, yes or no, did President Trump and the USDA freeze $500 million in food deliveries to food banks under the Emergency Food Assistance Program without explanation?
Thank you, sir. Not able to answer that question.
The answer to that question is yes. In March of 2025, USDA suspended millions of dollars in Commodity Credit Corporation funds originally destined for food banks across the country through the Emergency Food Assistance Program. I have several others as examples here. I didn't even get a chance to visit about whole milk. I grew up as a young person, Roger Marshall, not with much money in the bank, but we were blessed to have a dairy down the street. And my friends still make fun of me because when I get a carton of milk from the grocery store, I shake it. And they ask me, why are you shaking that carton? Well, that's how I grew up. The cream rose to the top in that milk, and you had to shake it before you were going to drink it if you were going to enjoy it. My debate is not about whole milk. I drink it. I support it. But if we want more whole milk to families across the country and more nutritious food, let's have that debate and let's stand strong. Let's get a farm bill done. Let's make sure we do this where we support producers across the country and support the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. So that my farmers back home, when they're having conversations with USDA about their planting schedule in a year, because they know who their customers are going to be and who they're going to be able to sell food to, and then the rug gets pulled out from them after they made a year of decisions to plant the stuff, it don't make sense. I think we can do things better around here. Thank you for the time. I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Studi, for being here today. We do appreciate your testimony very, very much. And it's very, very helpful. Let's take a second and get the other panel in place.
These so they're ready.
Oh, it's okay.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're back in business. First, I would like to introduce Dr. Keith Ayub, who's an associate clinical professor emeritus at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York City. For over 32 years, Dr. Ayub directed the nutrition clinic as part of the Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center at Einstein. He's also a registered dietitian and nutritionist with over 30 years of clinical experience working mostly with low-income minority children and families in the Bronx. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Ayub. I look forward to your testimony.
Thank you to Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and the committee for the opportunity to speak to you about the Whole Milk for Healthy Kids Act. As introduced, I'm an associate professor emeritus of pediatrics at the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in New York. For 33 years, I directed the nutrition clinic as part of the Children's Evaluation and Rehabilitation Center. It's just a large diagnostic and treatment center at Einstein for children and families with special needs. I'm also an RDN, a registered dietitian nutritionist. My clinic serves mostly low-income minority children and families in the Bronx, and testifying before Congress is not typically part of my job. I'm here because the issue matters to the children I see, so it matters to me. Dairy milk in schools, and dairy milk in general, has 13 essential nutrients, including 3 of the 4 what are called nutrients of concern: calcium, potassium, and vitamin D, so identified by the dietary guidelines because the majority of Americans, including children, aren't getting adequate amounts. In terms of health, a plethora of scientific literature demonstrates that the consumption of cow's milk provides children with better bone health, a lower risk for type 2 diabetes, and a lower risk for cardiovascular disease. A systematic review of studies that looked at cardiometabolic health in children ages 2 to 18 years found that consumption of dairy foods, including whole and reduced fat milk, had no association with cardiometabolic risk. Now, saturated fat doesn't exist in isolation in foods, yet historically, we viewed saturated fat monolithically. We now know that not all saturated fat behaves the same way in the body. In dairy foods, it's bound to protein in a protein dairy, like a dairy fat, or rather a protein fat matrix. And in this form, the body seems to have handled it differently. When saturated fats are in the protein fat network that occurs in dairy foods like milk, yogurt, and cheese, they appear not to decrease bad cholesterol and to lower the harmful portion of bad cholesterol. Now, can other foods lower bad cholesterol and reduce cardiovascular risk? Absolutely. But they can't provide the 13 essential nutrients in milk. Numerous systematic reviews have found that higher fat milk consumption to be associated with lower childhood obesity. I work primarily with Black and Hispanic children, and obesity rates are higher in this population. And that said, in 2010, when whole milk and reduced fat were removed from school meals, obesity prevalence was about 17%. Since the removal of whole milk and reduced fat milk in schools, obesity prevalence has increased. It's now 21%, but it's higher, about 25% in Black and Hispanic children, which is the population that I work with. Clearly, whole milk wasn't, the issue here. The type of milk in schools wasn't the cause of this, and it's not the cure. Taking this a step further, if children are not drinking milk in school because the school doesn't have the type of milk they prefer, one would postulate that they would lose weight. There's no evidence that this is happening. No matter what type of milk is offered in school, none of it's nutritious until students drink it. And they don't drink it often enough, which just exacerbates their nutrient and dietary gaps. Moreover, giving the children the kind of milk option they like can encourage participation in school meal programs, and that's my goal. Most of the children that I see are from low-income families, and specifically, milk provides 22% of the calcium, 40% of the vitamin D, and 10% of the potassium in the American diet. But in a study of low-income children, 77% of their daily milk intake came from school meals. In conclusion, milk, including low-fat milk, reduced fat milk, low-fat and whole milk and skim, and lactose-free varieties, represents a nutrient package that I've never been able to find in any other single food or beverage. And thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Ayub. Next, we'll hear from Ms. Krista Byler. Mrs. Byler currently serves as the district chef and food service director for Union City Area School District, a rural community located in northwestern Pennsylvania. She studied at Pennsylvania's Institute of Culinary Arts and spent several years working as a professional chef prior to entering school nutrition in 2005. Mrs. Byler comes from a family of dairy farmers and brings her appreciation for agriculture and passion for culinary education to school nutrition. Thank you very much, Mrs. Byler, for taking time away from your family and your students to be with us today.
Chairman Boozman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak before you today. My name is Krista Byler. I'm a professional chef turned lunch lady. I've been with the Union City Area School District for 20 years as the food service director and district chef. When I began my career in child nutrition, it was for selfish reasons. The schedule aligned better with my family life, and few food service positions offer that opportunity. What I did not know 20 years ago, but quickly learned, was how child nutrition would change me and even break me. I think we've heard stories today that speak to that. Half of the reason I'm here today is that passion for child nutrition. The other half, as Senator Boozman mentioned, I come from a dairy family. I grew up in my grandfather's dairy backyard and have been married for 24 years to a once dairy farmer, now turned beef producer. So dairy holds a huge space in my heart, obviously, as does child nutrition. In 2010, when the child reauthorization was passed, I was very concerned about how the school milk changes would affect both our students and our dairy farm families in Pennsylvania and nationwide. I kept a close eye on the milk consumption and waste that we started seeing in about 2012 when the act actually was put into practice. It was heartbreaking what I was seeing at our little 1,000 student school district. The amount of waste that we were throwing away each day was disheartening. As the years grew with this new legislation in place, my dairy orders also greatly declined. So we were seeing a huge increase in waste and a huge decline in the amount of milk that I was actually ordering because our students were not choosing to take milk. In the spring of 2018, I attended the Legislation Action Committee put on by the School Nutrition Association in Washington, D.C., where I had the opportunity to meet with G.T. Thompson and a group of school nutrition professionals that were like-minded in their concern for the school milk waste. And as well, there were some dairy interest groups there. So through that meeting, I was introduced to the Pennsylvania Grassroots Dairy Committee, and they had invited me to do some data collection for the group. So with the blessing of our school board of directors, in the 2019-20 school year, we ran a school milk choice trial. We began offering all levels of milk fat, both flavored and unflavored, in our district for the entire school year. The results are astounding. In my written testimony, if you would like to check out the full presentation with all of the survey results and the data, it's there for you to read. What I want to really drive home today is two main data points: the 50% increase in milk consumption and the 95%, that's right, 95% reduction in milk waste, just because we offered a variety of milk choices that fit our students' needs. This is a win for our students as well as our farmers. We need to be the change makers that our students and dairy farmers both need. We need to bring back the ability to offer milk fat choice in schools, including nutrient-dense whole milk, which, by the way, is just 3.25 to 3.5% milk. I would be remiss if I didn't address the concerns that you've also heard a lot about today regarding the local foods cuts, CEP reduction, the Patrick Leahy programs. Unfortunately, those cuts combined with the increasing cost of procurement may force schools to scale back or abandon some of the efforts that they've put into place recently that are really incredible. And the school meals you heard about today, I can firsthand say that there are some very, very incredible things happening that do not speak to that. And I hate to see those cut due to the lack of funding. I believe access to good quality, nutrient-dense school food is a basic right of education. School meals are an essential school supply. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak. I welcome any questions you might have.
Thank you. Dr. Lynette Dodson currently serves as the Deputy Superintendent of School Nutrition for the Georgia Department of Education. Prior to joining the Georgia Department of Education in 2019, she served as local school nutrition director in Georgia for over 18 years. Her leadership in helping Georgia students continue receiving meals during the pandemic earned her Georgia's, quote, Big Voices for Children Award. In 2023, Dr. Dodson, thank you for joining us today. We look forward to your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the importance of the national school meal programs and share some current challenges and best practices. I'm Lynette Dodson, Deputy Superintendent of School Nutrition for Georgia Department of Education and a registered dietitian. Prior to my role at the state, I was a local director for almost 20 years, and I really discovered my passion for school nutrition while working in my children's school district. I've seen firsthand the positive impact the national school meal programs on children have locally and statewide. School meals are a vital source of nutrition for 30 million school-aged children across our country. It's a program perfectly positioned to significantly impact the health of our nation's children if properly supported. As a valuable partner in education, school meals can integrate food-based learning to help students learn about food, enhance their education, and improve their diets. School meals are a science-based investment in our nation's future, supporting children's growth, development, and academic success. With the diverse menu of whole grains, lean meats, fruits, vegetables, and milk, they should be accessible to all students as part of their school day. We must not let the progress made in improving students' dietary habits during the school year falter during summer months when school is out. This is why summer meal programs are essential. They provide children with continued access to nutritious meals even outside of the school setting. The recent flexibilities allowing to-go meal options in rural areas has significantly expanded our reach, ensuring more children in need receive healthy food while school is out. However, I think it's important for the committee to understand that there are serious challenges that the programs are facing today, including soaring food costs, labor shortages, and unnecessary program complexities. Federal funding that supports these meals must cover the cost of purchasing food, paying for labor and benefits, as well as purchasing equipment. Many programs are challenged, just like consumers, with increased costs in all these areas. Expanded reimbursement is needed to maintain the food quality required to be domestically sourced and the skilled workforce to prepare that food. There are complex program regulations that require extensive staff training and support and take away from the focus of nutritious foods. Continuing to simplify the program and reduce these administrative burdens would allow more focus to be on the food that's actually served to students. Beyond the need for increased reimbursement and simplification of regulations, the programs have benefited from additional investments such as the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program and equipment grants. The Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program introduces fruits and vegetable snacks to elementary school children, and it improves acceptability and consumption of those food items in the meal program. The equipment grants help provide specialized kitchen equipment needed to prepare school meals with fresh ingredients. Recent federal grants expanded the inclusion of locally sourced foods, improving the quality of these meals and providing direct support for local farmers. All of these supports have only strengthened the program and could be increased to expand the documented positive impacts. In Georgia, our local districts embrace innovation to focus on the quality of meals served to our students. Our K-12 culinary culture moves beyond just regulatory compliance. This means the incorporation of fresh local foods, applying culinary techniques, food safety standards with good customer service, which creates a school meal experience. Federal requirements must be met, but the standard should be greater than just meeting requirements. And for Georgia, it's a quality school meal being provided to every student in every school every day. Thank you from our nation's school-aged children and school nutrition professionals for the financial commitment that has been made for almost 80 years funding school meals. The additional grant funding has allowed for the expansion of farm-to-school initiatives, purchases of kitchen equipment, and expansion of local foods. Providing quality school meals that look and taste good is an investment worth making. Please consider expanding the reimbursement rates, continue to invest in farm-to-school and local purchasing programs and grant initiatives to streamline program regulations. Our goal should be to ensure a quality school meal is available to every student every day in our nation's schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you. Senator Slotkin, welcome to you. When she couldn't be here at this moment, Mr. Gorman, and passed on your good wishes. I know you've served as the food service director for public schools in Michigan for 25 years, and you are a graduate of the Michigan State University Eli Broad School of Business with a bachelor's degree in hotel restaurant management. In addition to your work as school food director for your school district, you have served in a number of roles related to child nutrition and school meals, and you've served the School Nutrition Association of Michigan as well. So we thank you and welcome you to this hearing.
Thank you, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and members of the committee. I appreciate this opportunity. As has been said, my name is Dan Gorman. I've been the School Food Service Director in Montague Area Public Schools and North Muskegon Public Schools for the past 26 years. But today, I'd like to talk about this dollar. This dollar is allocated by Congress for school meals. In my opinion, is the best dollar that the government spends. We've been given a mission in school meals: feed America's children. We do that every day. 30 million lunches, 15 million breakfasts served by kind, caring nutrition professionals offering well-balanced meals. But what else does the dollar do? Those 45 million meals every day include fruits and vegetables grown by American farmers, meat from American ranchers and producers, and milk from American dairies. It funds food manufacturers, food distributors, and provides meaningful work to lunch ladies across the nation. Finally, school meals serves as a financial and nutritional safety net for millions of kids. Now, I know this hearing is about whole milk, and I would just like to note, flexibility rather than mandates allows me to best serve my students and reflects the needs of my community. But what worries me more is the proposals that would reduce community eligibility provision and divert resources away from school meals. CEP is smart government. CEP allows high-need schools to offer breakfast and lunch at no charge to all students. It takes an economic snapshot of the community called an ISP, using SNAP and Medicaid data. Schools with an ISP of 25% or higher qualify for CEP. To account for families not eligible enrolled in SNAP, CEP applies a 1.6 multiplier. In North Muskegon, our ISP is 25%. We can offer free meals to all of our students. Our federal reimbursement is approximately 40%. Luckily, Michigan is a Healthy School Meals for All state, and the state picks up the additional 60% of our cost shortfall. CEP is a great success. In North Muskegon, we saw a 300% increase in our breakfast participation and a 30% increase in our lunch participation. It's made a real difference. Our ability to focus on student meals and not paperwork has been a game changer. The proposal to raise the CEP threshold from 25% to 60% would devastate our districts I oversee and schools nationwide. If passed, Montague, North Muskegon, and 24,000 other high-need schools would lose CEP and free meal access. Let me talk a little bit about the non-CEP meal application process. It's inefficient. My families would have to fill out an application, and then my staff would have to review that application. And then I would have to look at it to make sure everything's right. And then someone from our state office, every 3 to 5 years, they would come look at the piece of paper. And then we hire an auditor every year, and they check that piece of paper. And then at some point, the USDA comes by and they look at it, all to confirm that Johnny is deserving of a free meal. If the House Budget Chair's proposal to increase house income verification passes, I would have to process over 1,000 applications a year. There's large school districts that would have the burden of about 20,000 applications. And this is a big concern to me. I would also say the other cutbacks that have been talked about around agriculture is very hurtful. Investing in small agriculture is essential for national security. A resilient nation requires strong small farms, and these programs build that resilience. They must continue. This committee has a long history of getting things done. While other things might work differently in these halls, this committee has always been a group that works for America. I hope that continues. I'm incredibly grateful to be here to share this message. We need to be successful in school nutrition because our students can't be successful without it. I'm ready to help in any way to make this dollar work better for our kids, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you very much, and we do appreciate you all being here and the helpful testimony. Mrs. Byler, in your testimony, you highlighted the significant reduction of milk waste as a result of the trial you conducted to offer students a wider variety of options. Can you expand on how limiting choice has led to increased waste of milk and how expanding choice could result in less milk being thrown away?
Absolutely. Obviously, I can only speak really for my district, but in my district, most of the students were very upset when we had the rollback back because they're not familiar with skim milk or 1%. And I will give them credit. They all tried it, and the majority decided they didn't like it. So when we had the milk trial back after about 7 years of not having those options, they were thrilled. Our student council actually did the data collection, and unfortunately, they took a little bit of heat after the 2020 school year when we went back to not being able to offer the variety. It just overwhelmingly, the feedback we had from the students was they want what they're familiar with. They want something that is satisfying. Our athletes especially were very vocal about something that sticks with them. It's a perfect recovery drink. So there's just a lot of anecdotal data that I have from our students that, you know, what works for them is best. Having a full variety of options is best.
Very good. Dr. Ayub, in your testimony, you speak to the complexity of obesity and the tendency of many groups to point to one issue as the sole cause for obesity. Can you expand on how policymakers in the nutrition community have gotten it wrong in the past by drawing a correlation between milk and obesity?
There actually is no correlation between milk and obesity. It's actually, the correlation is inverse. The greater consumption of dairy foods historically has shown less obesity. And I want to, can I build on what Ms. Byler said about what the children chose? I know my kids in my clinic have said that they find skim milk watery. It's just what you're used to, and they're not used to that at home. And they may take that carton of milk. That's fine. The school will get reimbursed. I'm concerned they drain that carton of milk, because if they take a few sips and then, okay, that's enough, I'm done, because I don't want any more. That's different than if they take the carton and they actually drain it. okay, and they finish that carton. There's less food waste, and there's more nutrition going into the children. And I'll tell you, I think I mentioned, and I've certainly submitted it in my testimony, my written testimony, that the dairy fat in milk behaves when it's combined with a protein fat matrix. It's not handled by the body the same way. It's handled a little bit differently. And study after study has shown, and a review of studies has shown, that I mentioned in my submitted testimony, that greater consumption of dairy foods, including whole fat dairy foods, has been associated with less obesity and less cardiometabolic risk. Now, I want kids to eat a full meal. I want the whole meal to be consumed. And if kids get the options, I'm not talking about taking any options away from kids, but I want the full access that they should have for the range of options of milk that are available. And they may come to lunch or breakfast because they have the milk they like, but they're going to stay for the meal. That is my goal. If they may come for the milk, but I want them to stay for the whole meal, because that's the way I can get a balanced meal into those kids.
Very good. Senator Klobuchar.
Thank you very much, Senator Boozman. Thank you, all of you. Go to you, Mr. Ayub. In your testimony, you talk about the critical importance of healthy eating, nutrition during childhood, especially with respect to calcium. Can you explain in more detail why this period of life is so important in terms of nutrition and nutrients?
Thank you. I would love to, because we don't have our whole lives to build our bone bank. We have the first 25-ish years. And study after study has shown that kids are under-consuming, calcium and all the nutrients that are necessary to build bones, and that includes potassium, vitamin D, et cetera. And if they skip the milk in school, now that might seem like it's no big deal for a day, maybe even a week, but if they forego a glass of milk every day they're in school, every day for 12 years, we're going to graduate them with a diploma and not very good bones. Mm-hmm. And that's not, we owe our kids better than that.
Thank you.
Can I add to that just 1 second? Because this is, and I think it was mentioned earlier that we're going to see earlier osteoporosis, earlier osteopenia. And we always think of that as an old people's disease. It is a pediatric disease with adult consequences.
Got it. Thank you. Ms. Byler, do you believe we've made progress in school meals in recent years, and how?
Yes, 100%. I am seeing success stories with farm-to-school programming, through the Patrick Leahy program, with the Sheffian Foundation, the Healthy Meals initiatives. There are a lot of fantastic programs available that have helped school districts. I think that there's a huge movement. I mean, there was a huge movement, and it continues to grow for culinary professionals moving into school programs. And I'm seeing...
I've done that. We've done meat cutting in Minnesota. I've been at a bunch of their things in trailers outside the school.
Yes.
With a lot of knives, but it's very good.
And we are seeing local beef in schools. We're seeing local produce. It's really amazing work.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Ms. Dodson. School meal programs support American farmers by receiving a portion of their federal reimbursement as a commodity credit. Can you talk about how you use this credit, how it supports families in Georgia?
Absolutely. It's a huge factor. In Georgia, we have a goal of at least 20% of our school meals being sourced locally in Georgia. And of course, most recently from the local Foods for School initiative, we know we've spent almost $5 million in addition to the USDA foods that are sourced through our DoD Fresh program. And that program, we're serving about $6 million worth of local produce through that program, as well as additional purchases that are made at the local level. So there's a lot of Georgia food being served on Georgia trays.
Thank you. Mr. Gorman, like you're enthusiastic testimony down there. You've said that community eligibility has made as much of an impact on school meals as anything you've seen in your 25 years as a school food director. Can you talk about why community eligibility stands out as a positive force for schools?
You know, I've noticed in my career in the 26 years, it's really been the last 5 years where I've been qualified for the CEP program. And I've noticed the difference of really just the time I have to do things and the time my staff has to do things. In the last 5 years, we've some farm to school
red tape,
red tape. And so we're able to focus on school meals and the food in front of the kids.
You also talk in your testimony about the fact that SNAP cuts would undermine your ability to serve kids through the community eligibility. I asked this earlier, and our USDA expert, who I respect, was going to get back to us on that. But that's something right in front of us right now, as some of my colleagues have pointed out. Can you talk about why this is the case and what the impact would be?
You know, SNAP is a way most of our children qualify for school meals. And if they come off of that program, then they could not qualify for school meals. And that really, what that does is that returns hunger to the classroom. And hunger is humiliating for a child, embarrassing, painful, and most likely unnecessary.
Okay, and last, just back to you, Ms. Dotson. Some people have proposed raising the threshold for community eligibility from 25% to 60% of low-income students. Can you talk about the impact of such a change to Georgia? And can you estimate how many schools and students would lose access to school meals if such a change were made?
Yes, ma'am. Currently, we have 1,296 schools out of our 2,300 that operate the community eligibility provision in Georgia, and this has been a tremendous amount of growth. We would lose potentially 350 of those schools with that change, and with the further changes with SNAP, that could be an even greater factor moving forward. So about 500,000 children potentially would lose access.
Thank you for your thoughtful testimony, all four of you, and thank you, Senator Bozeman.
Senator Marshall.
Thank you again, Chairman Bozeman, Ranking Member Klobuchar, and again, Senator Welch, my co-leader on this legislation. Welcome to all the panel members, and thank you for taking time out of your day for something obviously is important, near and dear to all your hearts, so I appreciate it. I want to start off with Chef Byler. Can I call you Chef?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't get to hear all your testimony. I'm reviewing it here, but it sounds to me like when you offer students a choice of milks, consumption goes up, and can you just speak really quickly to that again?
Sure.
Giving them choices, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. The milk that we were ordering increased by 50%, and the waste decreased by 95% during the trial year
Wow.
that we did.
That's incredible. I mean, it's absolutely incredible, and it's amazing when we do a little education, a little coaching, a little teaching, a few choices, that eventually the consumer makes these choices. When you're considering the cost of a student's meal, the lunches that you're in charge of, I'm sure you do have to think about cost a little bit. And I hate to ask a question I don't know the answer, but is milk an expensive item, or how does the cost of milk formulate into that school lunch program as you think about the cost of the nutritious lunch you're serving?
Sure. I mean, nationwide, we have about $4.50 to put a lunch together, and that includes everything, all of our overhead costs. In Pennsylvania, where I'm at, in northwestern Pennsylvania, the cost of milk is about 27 cents. So
for a carton?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. So
I just remember again growing up, like Peter said, at 10 o'clock every morning, the milk lady came in, and they were a nickel, and I got a dime. I had a dime to spend on them, and had an extra milk ticket to punch at lunch because my parents wanted me to have extra milk, and I still credit milk to so many great things as well. What is your advice to us that we're missing so far as we try to bring, in my opinion, whole milk back to the school?
I think it was said very well several times today. We can do better. I think if we just bring back the milk choice to schools, we would see a huge increase in consumption, a huge decrease in waste, and satisfaction for our students would be through the roof.
And one of those choices would be whole milk.
Absolutely.
Right, as well. So, Dr. Ayub, I want to talk to you a second. So I'm the OB, I got to bring the baby in. You're a pediatrician, right?
I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a doctor of nutrition.
Of nutrition. For some reason, I thought you were in pediatrics. Don't know where I got that. You started talking about osteopenia and osteoporosis, and I just want to drive this home. There's just nothing more frustrating, challenging in my life when an elderly woman has osteoporosis and her vertebrae have collapsed. And really, I mean, they're in horrible pain. They're in the emergency room, and it's not like it's not like replacing a hip. I can't go in there and help those folks out. So just speak a little bit more what you're seeing clinically when it comes to osteopenia and porosis, and how important it is that you reach your maximum density around 26, 28, and then it's downhill from there unless you're taking some pretty aggressive medications.
I can tell you, I mean, since my clinic deals mostly with kids, but I see what happens with their parents who grew up, who were young parents who did not grow up and with drinking a lot of milk, and they do suffer. They do pay the price, and knee problems, hip problems, etc. I take dietary histories on all the kids that I see, and I always want to focus on the balance of nutrients that kids are getting. And if I see food groups that are missing, that's a red flag for me. And I always ask them, I said, do you drink the milk in school? And I want to find out why. And they say, well, I don't like it, okay? And I know what kind of milk is offered. It's skimming 1%. It may not be what they're used to, but that's a missed opportunity. You know, that's just a missed opportunity. Now, some kids will drink the milk fine, and I'm not worried about taking away options. I just want to make sure that the full spread of options is there so that kids can get the milk that they want and they can actually drink the entire carton of it.
Yeah, I meant to ask Chef Byler what the options were at school these days, but I still want to just, I mean, sugar sodas aren't just neutral. When it comes to osteoporosis and penia bone, it's actually going the wrong direction. Go ahead.
Can I speak 1 second? Also, if kids don't get the kind of milk they drink, they're going to end the school day with 8 ounces less fluid. They're going to be thirsty. Right. They're going to be hungry because there's protein and nutrition in that milk. And they're going to go right down to the corner, at least where I live in New York City, and they're going to go buy some 24-ounce bottle of swill. Okay,
Yeah.
it's basically sugar.
Yeah,
water
because
and-
milk is what? Is it 80% water, 90%?
Yeah,
I forget.
but they're going to a bottle of something
to get hydrated.
that's going to have, first of all, more sugar than they get an entire week in school. But even then, it's got no nutrition in it, and that's losing.
Yeah, but I emphasize, though, soda isn't just, you don't lose the benefits of milk. It's actually, soda is really hard on your bones. Is that right, Chef Byler?
Yes.
Okay, I better yield back. Thank you so much.
Senator Welsh.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. You know, one of the reasons I so appreciate this committee, led by you and Senator Klobuchar, is the kind of witnesses we get. I mean, you guys are doing good work. Really appreciate it. You know, I'm thinking about you, and you found a way that suited your schedule, and then you turned it into this incredible career that has been so beneficial, not just for your kids, but for kids all over the country. That's pretty impressive. And each of you has been so committed to doing practical things in the local level, community level, where there's so much pressure in our communities that pull families apart, that make it tough for parents managing with their kids going to school, that they worry about how they're doing there, and food is so essential. So I just want to express to each of you my gratitude for the work that you're doing. And Mr. Chairman, as you know, our job is to make their job easier, not harder. We fail in that a lot of times, but this committee is really committed to trying to do everything you can. I'll start by just asking Ms. Dotson, put it in the context of broader issues than just milk, but the nutrition programs. We have debates here about funding any kind of program, and that's fair and square. But I literally have not heard a witness, including the most fiscally conservative folks here, who have anything that they object to with respect to school nutrition. You know, we have a debate about whether it should be needs-based or whatever, but, you know, in addition to the fundamentally beneficial effect of having kids get good nutrition in school, I've always felt there's a socialization element to that. kids having a meal together, sharing milk together, which is so much part of not only building a good body, but good character. So maybe you could just comment a little bit about the benefits you see.
Yes, sir. I think school meals have a unique opportunity, as I mentioned. I honestly believe it could be a tremendous solution for our nation's health. You have the opportunity to model healthy eating, expose children to a wide variety of locally grown foods, especially that are healthy and nutritious. And we've seen the combination of that with nutrition education, or what we call food-based learning, is a way to bring education lessons alive, but also get students more comfortable with the food choices that they're being served as part of school meals, because they're not always seeing those at home in their regular diet. So they're not always exposed to fresh fruits and vegetables like we have the opportunity to provide them with at school. So I think education has that opportunity, and school nutrition can kind of be that educational hub, if you will, and a foundation for children within their school day.
Thank you. Mr. Gorman, my predecessor in the United States Senate from Vermont is that man who's staring at us right from his picture up there, former chairman of the Agriculture Committee, Patrick Leahy, and we in Vermont are very proud of all he did. One of his many accomplishments was the Patrick Leahy Farm to School and Local Food for Schools cooperative program. That was terminated for the rest of this fiscal year, and my understanding is it'll be reinstated next year. But can you just comment on the benefit of Senator Leahy's legacy program that was supported with a strong bipartisan majority in the United States Senate?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It really is. We were a recipient of the grant probably 5 or 6 years ago, and we had applied again this coming year and got that notice that it was canceled. So it was really crushing to us. And, it is a jump start to local food movements. And I think about over our past 10, 15 years, it started us building towards figuring out the local infrastructure and getting more local food and starting school gardens. And over the past 5 years, we've gotten private and public grants in our county over $2 million to move on this issue, to get kids so they understand what local food is, to make those connections. We're starting a food processing plant in Muskegon County with the goal of getting local Michigan potatoes diced and frozen so we can get them on every plate in Muskegon County and beyond. All of that started with that farm to school grant that we got 10 years ago as a cooperative to start putting those pieces together.
Thank you very much. Before I yield back, I just want to say this committee has an opportunity to help the Senate be a better Senate. And I think one of the things we can do is take some of these specific bills that we agree on and move them, like this whole milk, Senator Marshall's whole milk bill. So I'm just going to suggest to the chairman to give that some thought. We could move this before we get a full farm bill. Let's get some things done that we think make sense to get done and help our farmers and help our kids. I yield back.
Well, thanks to the panel for being here. I agree with the senator from Vermont when he said that you all do good work. And I was very impressed, as was the rest of the committee, by your testimony and your thoughtfulness. And with that, the record will remain open for 5 business days, and today's hearing is adjourned.